should be popping up. It should be popping up now. There we go. Alex has also put together a QR code for the link, and he's assured me that he's going to put it in a subtle place it's easy for you to use. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Thank you for that, Alex. Banter. No, let's maybe try it in the corner, shall we? That's maybe a good idea. There we go. Good. That's better. What else is coming up on tonight's show then, Alex?
There we go. Helps if I add myself to the stream. Hello.
Yes, there we go. Showbiz. I like that.
Slick as anything. Apologies as well. There was a connection issue. So the opening titles got completely cut off. And also, and also the bongs. So at least you do get a chance to do that. At least you get a chance to do that joke again.
Okay. Yeah. I might have to. We'll start that again. That was. I did wonder because there was no clock in the corner, and I was sort of.
Oh, there's people now. So I'll just disappear. You do the bongs gag, and we'll carry on like nothing's happened.
Yeah, showbiz. Right, let's try again. Anyone that is watching, just ignore all of that, and let's pretend like we're starting this again. So welcome to Booze at 10, the topical news show that takes the topical out of the news, where a panel of comedians have a drink and talk all things comedy. However, much like the news, we do still have the bongs.
Never. I mean, it's funny.
It's worth doing twice, isn't it? It's definitely
never ever going to get old. So before we do start the show proper, I'll say I'll be popping up sort of like every 15 minutes or so with the viewer comments. But after last week, we invented during the show a drinking game. For everyone to
sounds good.
So we're going to set the trigger words right now to begin with. So tonight, at any point during the show, you hear anyone, panel or host included, say the word unprecedented, then everyone has to take a swig. So if I hear the word unprecedented, I'll then play this sound effect. Take a swig. Simple.
Nice.
It's
like
simple.
That.
Yeah. So after that, the main one, if anyone says the phrase pre-COVID or anything remotely close to pre-COVID, well, that's
which is popping up on the news all the time.
Yeah.
So
if anyone says pre-COVID, then that's the big one. Then you've got to do this. Down it, down it, down it. Yeah.
I think if we can, not that we should maybe facilitate large-scale binge drinking, but if any of the audience want to get involved in the drinking game, feel free. Although commenting with the trigger words to make the paddle drink probably won't count, because that will end up in carnage, won't it? Luckily, Alex, you'll be in the background filtering through the messages anyway, so that's good.
And give you some grief back. So I'm going to disappear now, and then bring your panel on as you introduce them. So see you in about 15 minutes or so.
Okay, so everyone that's watching, let's pretend that I can hear you. Let's give a warm welcome to all of our panel: Nghia, May, Tony Cowens, and Matt Price. How are you all? Hello, thank you for coming on. Are we all good?
I'm all good. Thank you.
Good, yeah.
Yes, I can hear everyone. Perfect. Good.
Good.
So thank you very much for coming on to the show. Like I said, it's just going to be sort of a casual chat, really, and a bit of a wing it and see what happens, and talk some comedy and yeah. So I think I was gonna start with a question for everyone, if that's okay. Since lockdown, see, now I've got to be careful because I know what the trigger words are. Since lockdown, a lot of things have changed, specifically in the entertainment industry. One thing I've noticed, there seems to be a lot of possibly tension, but maybe it's just people not being able to go and do gigs live and things like that. But there seems to be a lot of tension in regards to not just comedy, but things in general, like perhaps, or in what way do you think comedy will be affected now as a result of COVID and potentially the growth of virtual gigs and things like that? Do you think it'll change long term, or do you think there is a way for comedy to sort of come back from this?
I'm always surprised that there aren't more clairvoyants on the comedy circuit, to be honest with you, because the number of people who tell me what's going to happen over the next 6 months to a year is unbelievable. The gloom and the doom and the misery. And listen, I'm not Mr. Optimist. I'm not like, hey, look at me, I'm happy. Let's all hold hands and sing Kumbaya. But if I could predict the future, do you think I would be a comedian? Absolutely not. You know what I mean? There's no point. I love it. I love the art of comedy. I like other comedians mostly. There's one or two shit character acts I wouldn't piss on if they were on fire, but that's another thing. I'm sorry, but putting on a costume and shouting is not a character. Oh, look, I got a bottle on the head. Do you know what I mean? It's not a character, is it?
Yeah,
but
okay.
Point being, I don't know. Honestly, mate, I think it looks grim, but let's be honest, right? This has been the highlight of my week.
Oh, wow, there you go.
Cool, that is where I'm at. I'm very pleased to be here. This is unprecedented time for me. Now, the reason I've said that is because I've only got that.
Take a swig.
Well, I meant to say pre-COVID because I wanted
Down it. Down.
that much to down, you see. That was why I did it.
Down it.
That was, there we go. I love that. Thank you for getting involved in that.
I'm so sorry. That will not happen again. But the bottom line is, I think I've actually been triggered with you asking that question. We don't know, do we? But all you've got to do is try your best, and that's it.
I think that, to be honest with you, I'm a little surprised because that sort of reaction, I think, from you is rather unprecedented. Couldn't help myself.
Take a swig.
I've got to open mine first.
You've all ruined my joke. I was going to say that we're all hoping that Trump will become unprecedented.
Take a swig.
It's 2 swigs.
I don't know if that really counts, Alex. I'm not sure if you should really catch us out on a technicality there.
Spit it back
yes,
in.
It does. It counts.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for clearing that up. No, that's a good answer. I think it's a nice change of pace for somebody to say, I just don't know what the answer is, because there's a lot of posturing and guesswork, I suppose, isn't there? And I think that's maybe part of the problem. What I do like is there does seem to be a lot of people that are working hard to try and get things back to some sort of level, which is always, Has anyone done any socially distanced gig that they liked that worked well?
Yeah, and I've done a handful of gigs that have been socially distanced. I did one in a 400-seat theatre that only had like about 80, 90 people in it. They all spread out. But it was nice. I think at the moment the audiences are just happy to be seeing some live comedy, and so they've been really supportive, lovely audiences. Whether that will continue, if it carries on too much longer, who knows? But no, the few gigs I have done have been lovely, and obviously doing online stuff like this has been nice. And I know me and Matt did an online show early on in lockdown together.
Yeah, we did, didn't we? Yeah,
and they've been quite fun. It's a bit outside of my usual experience, but they've been good fun.
Cool. One of the reasons I wanted to get you, all three of you, sort of on the show at the same time. Obviously, Matt and Tony both vastly experienced comics, but very different styles completely in terms of your stage presence and your craft and things like that. And I think the question I wanted to ask, that I've posed this to a lot of comics over the years, is was there a moment for you where you realized that you were funny, or was there that? Do you remember that first gig where you were like, oh, hang on a second, I might be on something? I'll come to you, Nghia, in a minute with a similar sort of question. Whoever wants to, Tony or Matt, whoever wants to take that one first.
Well, personally, this probably sounds a bit awful, really, but when I first started comedy, I was kind of inspired to do comedy by the people that I saw who were absolutely terrible at it, more so than the people I saw who were great.
Okay, because almost in a sense that I'm funnier than that guy. Come on.
I thought when you see someone who's really, really good, you quite often think, oh, geez, I could never be that good. But if you see someone who's terrible stinking the place out, you think, yeah, I think I could be that bad.
I could match that. Yeah. Honest.
Yeah.
So I suppose the inspiration was because I was living in London as well, and I don't know if you know that much about London circuit. this was 10 more years ago, but I guess it's probably the same now. It's quite a variable standard. There's some people that are obviously really good, and some people that you think, well, I don't know why on earth they're doing this.
It's always been a bit of a gamble, London, for me, I think, because there's always the argument that you kind of need to do it for some of the more established gigs, or maybe to be seen by the right people or whatever. But it's also massively oversaturated, which does harm the you get some of those dodgy character acts that you refer to as well.
Sorry about that.
Who Matt's talking about. I think it sounds quite good. I want to see the
I think I genuinely touched a nerve there, Matt, didn't I? I think there was something changed in you there, I think.
No, absolutely not. There was just a surge of adrenaline.
Okay, well, good. I mean, I enjoyed the energy and getting involved in the game straight away, which is fun. So, Nghia, what I wanted to ask you is, obviously, I met you in Edinburgh a few years ago, and were you still studying then at that time? Were you at university?
Yeah, I think it was my final year in Edinburgh.
So, did you do your first gig in Scotland, or was it back in Vietnam?
Well, the funny thing is, I had like two first gigs in a way. Like, so my first unofficial gig was like when I was in secondary school, and they had like a talent show. And by then, I was already watching a lot of like stand-ups on YouTube, mostly Americans, the likes of Eddie Murphy. So I figured, I would just sign up and do that. And so that was the first time I ever did like stand-up, like in front of like a big auditorium, So that was pretty cool. But I started doing for a while, because I was just focusing on my studies, and also because it's hard to be funny when you're 16. So and then so 2014, I started uni. I moved to Edinburgh to start uni, and I joined the Comedy Society there, and also did the Freshers gig. So that was basically my first official gig, and that's when I started doing stand-up comedy, essentially on a more full-time basis.
Cool. So I'll just sort of fill you two in on a little story. So in 2018, I was doing a show at the Edinburgh Fringe, and I met Nghia there. And then a month later, I was doing some traveling around Asia, and to take some time out and things like that. And I was in Hanoi in Vietnam, and I was trying to find the first sort of English-speaking comedy club I could find. And funny enough, there was a lot out there actually. And who do I bump into? Nghia doing the gig, which was amazing, like 7,000 miles away from home or whatever. Have either of you two done any comedy abroad, and have you noticed anything? Did you have to learn anything? Was there anything different to? I mean, a lot of it is playing to expats anyway, but did you notice anything sort of vastly different between playing a gig here in the UK to playing something abroad?
I did a tour of Southeast Asia in 2012. So I went to Singapore, Cambodia, Kuala Lumpur, or KL, as they say, and Indonesia. And I had a brilliant time. It was a month, and it was good. It was back in the day, where the money was good, and you were very, very well looked after. And what I loved about that scene is that it was really emerging in 2012, and some of the guys there now are doing exceptionally well, and it was really interesting to sort of go there as a professional comedian and see these up and coming guys, and just see how good they are. I mean, Jinx Yo, I don't know if you know him. He's Chinese Singaporean. I think he's like the second coming of Christ or something like that. That's probably the one thing to say, isn't it? He's Chinese, and I'm probably going to get hate mail or something now. But maybe but he's too skinny to be Buddha. Do you know what I mean? But he's just one of the. For me, sorry, James, if you're watching, but he's one of the best acts I've ever seen. And it was interesting sort of going along and doing this festival in Singapore and having him and Foz, who's a Malay comedian, and Jason Leong as well, forgive the pronunciation, and basically having my ass handed to me. And it was great, man. They were sort of, I wouldn't say edgy, but because it was a new scene, it was interesting to watch them finding their feet. And I can remember Foz, and I'm going to get more hate mail now. saying, "Oh yeah, I was in the prayer room earlier on praying to Allah," and then he went, "Now I've got a beer, motherfuckers." And I'm not saying that I condone that in any way. I'm not. If there's that, please, if there's anybody in cyber terrorism or whatever wants to have a go, please don't. Okay, but I'm just saying that was what he said.
I will be amazed if this is getting enough traffic for cyber terrorism. But
it could be a penis appearing. I'm not going to say the color of the penis because that's not relevant in this day and age. Just appearing in the middle of the screen because that's what these cyber terrorists do now. I don't know. It doesn't seem like terrorism to tease you with a cock.
it's more cyber banter. That's what that
Matt, can I just ask you a question, Matt?
Of course, sorry, mate.
I just want to ask a question about your experience out in Southeast Asia. Did you find the gigs in Malaysia quite hard, but Indonesia?
Do you know what? I'll be honest with you. I'm going to be straight up.
Indonesia.
Come on, Tony.
Mate, that was very good. I was just about to pour me
Alex, where's the rim shot? Have you not got?
I didn't make one for this show. Sorry.
You didn't make one. Oh. What sort of producer are you? Come on.
That was very good. Very good. It was an amazing scene, and it was great to go out there, and it was really interesting. And the locals probably spoke better English than I can speak, and that's not me being a dick in any way. It's just a reality. So
do you know what I loved about it is that it's probably a terrible comparison for people that might have gone through actual troubles of addiction, but I've always felt like the first time I truly sort of, for want of a better word, smashed a gig, it was this incredible high that I almost feel like I've been hooked to it ever since, which is why I've been putting up with trying to make a career out of comedy for the last decade, with varying levels of success and failure. But when I did it in Thailand and Vietnam and stuff like that, it was almost like it was great and it was fun, but it was almost like I was learning to do it all over again for the first time. And that I think that was an amazing experience. It was a lot of fun. But luckily there were an awful lot of Australians in the audience too, so I got to just call along. I got to call a lot of people pricks as well, which is always fun. Anyway, do you because I was going to say the same thing. I find it's still, even now, I think, an emerging scene, and if it wasn't for I think pre-COVID, it might have gone on to be
down it, down.
Oh no, you can't down it. I've only.
There we go. I think pre-COVID. Oh, I did it again. Oh no.
Down it, down it.
That was see, I did the first one on purpose. That was a genuine respect. You don't have to have any part in this.
No.
This is.
I don't want to run out of orange squash.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course not. I mean, Robinson's is expensive these days as well. I don't understand how they can charge so.
Own brand.
Oh well, there you go. Exactly. Coincidentally, if anyone is watching on social media and you are enjoying this absolute carnage right now, you can always donate to the show to help us keep running and perhaps improve some of the facilities and the equipment that I use. Because as I mentioned to the guys before the show, I'm currently propping up my phone on a box of Trivial Pursuit. So it would be nice to have a proper setup for this. And you can also donate via the QR code, which is preset at £5, which at the very least would cover the cost of my beers, which evidently are going to run out quite quickly. I might be able to finish my question in a minute if I do remember how to phrase it properly without saying the trigger words. Right.
In the before times.
Before Corona.
In the before times.
BC.
Right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pose another question to you all, and you can all take turns to answer it.
Do you not want to hear about my overseas experiences? Go ahead.
Yes, of course. There you go. Tell us your story
because I've gigged on the Isle of Wight. and I tell you, the cultural differences were astonishing. I mean,
It must have been like time traveling.
I had to take all my references back to the 1950s. It was incredible.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay. Have
I'm
you
never
ever
going to
done?
the Isle of Wight ever again. Sorry, Isle of Wight.
No. Have you ever done any stuff before overseas, Tony?
I've gigged in a few places. I've gigged in a couple of places in the Middle East, and I've been over to Australia. Matt was in Australia when I was over there in Adelaide. That was quite an interesting experience because obviously, as you know, I don't know, people watching, most of my stuff is pun-based and silly wordplay. And it was interesting finding out that although Australians do speak English, but of a fashion,
Just about, yeah.
they don't get all the same references. Obviously, one of the things I had a joke about helter skelters, and I didn't realise that they don't have helter skelters. You know, the things you slide down as a kid. And I actually asked one of the Aussie guys that was there. I said, "Well, what do you call like the twisty slide thing that you get at a fairground?" And he went, "Well, mate, we call them the twisty slide at the fairground."
Wow.
They're very literal people.
Lovely. Beautiful.
Perfect. I love that. One of the things I've really enjoyed of yours during lockdown, which Alex got me onto actually, was the puns on the run thing. I really enjoyed those. I think there was only 3 or 4.
Yeah, I need to get out and do a bit more running.
But it's just something. I think since lockdown, I think there's been a lot of obviously this kind of stuff going on, trying to create alternative content for people that are missing live comedy. And I think a lot of things like that, there's little simple things like that are really funny, and I think they could eventually attract quite a big audience. I think just because it's just a simple hashtag, and the jokes are really funny. That was that one about I can't remember it. It was the one about ticking boxes. That one, it gets me every time.
God, you got
and could you tell it? You just tell it now.
Can I tell it? I can't remember that one. Hang on. I might have to look it up because otherwise I'm going to butcher my own joke. Hang on. You fill for a minute and I'll find.
Right. I mean, this is what I was trying to do with this.
Would now be a good time for viewer comments.
Now would be a great time for some viewer comments. Yes.
So you'll be pleased to know, despite some pretty solid double figures viewing figures across all of the platforms, only 2 blokes are commenting. So one being Ian Bowden. So Ian did say he was going to be on the JD, but by the looks of things, he started at midday. So he starts off by saying, "Is Graham filming this on the toilet?"
Okay.
Are you?
No, it's in this. I mean, I'm in the exact same place I was last week, Ian. But no, I'm not. It does maybe look like I'm slouching forward, like I'm trying to squeeze one out, doesn't it? But no, I'm not.
Ian does want to know if does a Nashville dive bar count as gigging abroad? Yes.
Well, considering
literally,
that Nashville is in another country,
that's America. Yes.
But yeah, that's America. So
so well done, Ian. Mark Dean Quinn has been uncommented first off, just with the aubergine emoji. So I've no idea what he's on about there.
He's all about the highbrow comedy, isn't
he? Very excited to see us.
I love it.
Clearly, he then goes on to pose a question himself. What's the weirdest place that you've gigged? Not a country, but a venue.
Oh, that's a good question.
Okay. Very quickly, I can answer that. I did a gig at Liverpool. There was a festival in Liverpool. And it was advertised as the smallest comedy gig ever. And it was literally me in a garden shed. And only 2 other people could come in at any time.
And this is in the before times. I nearly said it again. I gotta be honest. You wouldn't be able to do it now because it was we were all kind of crammed in. Right.
A garden shed. It was set up right near Albert Dock as well. It's quite a nice location, but it was in a garden shed.
Well, go on. I'm supposed to be hosting this anyway.
No, it's cool.
Quite
My most recent sort of unusual place was I did one in the back garden of a former criminal's house. So I was the former criminal. I was in his back garden, and I was stood on top of a sheet of wood that was placed over a jacuzzi. That was weird. in front of sort of quite a few criminal faces. And I said to a guy who had a tattooed face afterwards, I said, "Why do you have your face tattooed?" And he said, "Because I'm an armed robber. I did 12 years. I was a bit naughty when I got out. I got another year on recall, came back out, did another bit of work, was tipped off that the police were onto us. And they said they've got no DNA, but they do have a witness." He said, "So I tattooed my face." He said, "And they couldn't find enough other people to be in the police lineup with me, so the case got dropped and I didn't get done. So they couldn't find 6 other people with facial tattoos." So it's amazing. Now he runs a soup kitchen in Littlehampton. But yeah, it was weird. So that was a weird one. It was good though.
The gig over it. So you were stood over a jacuzzi, Matt, were you?
I was indeed. Yeah.
That'd have gone wrong. If that had gone wrong, you could have been in hot water, couldn't you?
Oh, no, Jesus Christ.
Okay. So Nghia, what about you? Weird venues?
Yeah, I guess so. This was back in I think it was like 2016. I think that was my first Fringe ever. So that was during the last week of the Edinburgh Fringe. So I got booked to do this like sort of children comedy show. But the whole idea that they were going to have actual stand-up because to perform to the parents. So so yeah, it was in a tent as well, like in the middle of a pub. So there was parents and kids, and it was weird in the sense that you have to like balance your material. Like you want to tell actual jokes to your to the parents, and then you also wanted to do silly voices to the kids. So I was just doing like a voice of like Bugs Bunny and Bill Cosby, and before everything went down, of course, and then
I was going to say the Bill Cosby thing's brave. That was
edgy, So
cool. I think I don't know if it's weird more than just mine. The one that pops to mind was I guess it was just after I started getting some paid work, especially locally. I actually had a gig at Bournemouth Airport, Hyatt Airport. It was booked as some sort of, I don't want to say corporate gig, but it kind of was. It was an event for the staff in the cafe, but obviously it's an airport, so there's still, Bournemouth's quite small, but there was still stuff going on, and they booked me to do 40 minutes, which I told them I could do, and I definitely couldn't. I'd only been going maybe.
We've all been there. I don't
know, 18 months. 18 months at the most, and at the time they said, "Oh, do 40 minutes. We'll give you." Well, I think it was really shit as well. They're like, "We'll do this party. Do 40 minutes. We'll give you 150 quid." And at the time, I was like, "Fucking hell, that's I've made it here." Like, because I spent the first, I would say maybe the first 2 years, apart from that one, the first 2 years of stand up, everything was. At best, I would get something towards my petrol. I would say for the first couple of years I was doing. So for them to go, "Oh, if you can do 40 minutes for this event at the cafe in Bournemouth Airport, we'll give you 150 quid." So I was like, "Absolutely, I'll fucking do that." Yes, of course. And of course I got heckled by a plane, didn't I? So it was just I lost. 10 minutes in, lost the audience completely. They all fucked off to the bar, and of course there was a buffet. And I basically had to try and walk in between the tables to try and get people's sort of attention, which was just
we've all done those sort of gigs.
Oh god. But yeah, that was definitely because it was just weird because I couldn't. When I thought back about it, I was like, in what world did you think that was ever going to work? Like, it's not set up for comedy at all.
Yeah.
But getting back to sort of lockdown stuff, as I say, sort of there's been a lot of things popping up during lockdown. People creating content. I've been trying this out, and Nghia, you're on a podcast as well. Is that right? You're doing
So I'm working on this podcast with like a bunch of other Vietnamese comedians. I'm hosting it actually. So it's called the Hot Podcast. So it's like a play on the hot, like that the hot pot. That Asian dish where you put stuff, soup where you put a lot of stuff in. And the idea is that like you have a panel of Vietnamese comedians show up like this, and you have like a non-Vietnamese guest, a comic, and we just talk about like engage in cultural exchange, talk about comedy and other stuff.
Oh, yeah, sounds good. And is that going to be a regular thing? Is that on all the time, like every week or once a month? What's the?
Yeah, so we try to record one every 2 weeks, just because of logistics, because we're working with like people from like different time zones. Of course. Because
so
you're
you're based in Dublin, is that right?
Yeah, based in Dublin, and I'm working with a guy based in Belgium, and then our panels are spread across like Vietnam, Australia.
Okay.
And obviously, we have guests from like different places as well, because all of us have to travel and we do comedy. We know people.
So it's just far too much for Zoom to handle, at least anyway. So,
yeah, I mean that's why we. That's why we went for the pro account. It's easy, and we record. So it's like a video thing. We record it over Zoom, and so we're just looking at like different platforms to distribute it. So we already have YouTube, and we're looking into Spotify and all those things.
Oh, cool. Okay, that's good. I feel like the Zoom bubble has burst pretty quickly. Like at the start of, you right there, Matt?
I'm all right. Sorry about that. The audience aren't meant to see this, are they? I've just hurt me back. Well, I don't hurt my back. I'm trying to. Sorry, this is terrible, isn't it?
It was nice to see a bit of slapstick from you, to be honst.
Absolutely. Oh, there we go.
So one of the reasons I wanted to get you on, Matt, though, is actually to talk about your podcast, which you've been doing way before lockdown and things like that. Is your Conversations with Criminals podcast. So you kind of alluded to it already in one of those stories, doing a gig in, was it over the top of Jacuzzi? And I found it fascinating in the way that you've approached it, in the sense that, for example, I listened to one today from, I think was the 12th of October. And was it Frank?
Frank Portinari.
Frank Portinari, yeah. And what I loved about that is you made a sort of sentiment about, or despite that you've called it Conversations with Criminals, you kind of approach it from a human sort of aspect, in that you refer to it as they are people that live different lives and perhaps have made the wrong decision or made a mistake, rather than calling them criminals. And I wanted to know really how the whole thing come about. It is a really good listen.
Yeah,
I think people should.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. I'd heartily recommend going to the website conversationswithcriminals.com, because you can just click on play and you can listen. But no, there's a certain sad element to it, but I'm not going to bring anybody down, because let's be honest, I'm on my second beer, and I've got 2 duvets to make my back feel less sore. So no one's going to get down. But just looking at myself, check I'm looking good in case there's any agents watching. Hello. I'm always thinking. But in 2006, I was in a long distance relationship with Martha, who is my missus. She's from Glasgow, and I've done very well. And long story short, her neighbour, who was lived above her, he always said, if my music is turned up too loud, let me know. He was a bodybuilder. He was a local drug dealer, and we know this because he had a sports car. And he was also on steroids. He tripled in size. And he went upstairs and said to him, do you mind turning the music down? It's Monday. It's 1 o'clock on a Monday morning. And he grabbed her by the back of the neck. He threw her to the floor. He kicked her in the head. There were 2 other men who were there, and they nearly killed her. Now, I was very upset by that. At the time, I didn't know who to speak to or where to turn. And I'm not exaggerating. She could have died. And the only reason she didn't die is because 2 of the men who were this guy's suppliers, they were coke dealers, dragged him off her. She went downstairs. There was a knock at the door half an hour later. 4 of them came down. They attacked her again. The policeman turned up, and you can imagine. So we'll fast forward 2 years. Her sister went to buy a gun because the guy was boasting. The guy was still on steroids. He was stood outside in the local close on a housing scheme in Glasgow with his top off, flexing his muscles. He'd beaten up a 14-year-old boy, and he was saying, "Look at me. I'm God. I am King fucking Kong. Look at me. Look at me." So Martha's sister went to buy a gun. I went to speak to the guy who she went to buy the gun from. He was an old-fashioned debt collector back in the day. And I said to him, "I've heard rumors about you." I said, "I heard that you used to screw people's hands into tables to get their undivided attention. Is that true?" I said, "And did it ever lead to more violence?" And he said, "Well, yes, it did lead to more violence, but only if I had met the bloke who owned the table." He was quite witty in his own sort of way. He said to Martha's sister, you can't have a gun. I'm not going to allow it. And you're going to have to allow things to run their course. I spoke to various people, ended up speaking to a con man who I went to his funeral 2 years after I spoke to him. He put me on the straight and narrow, told me all about crime, how it works. I then told a slightly longer version, half-hour version of what I'm told you now. Got a phone call from a guy in Hertfordshire called Stamp Vest Steve. He sells stamp vests for a living. I think I have one here, actually. I could get it out for you in a minute. He said to me, "I'm not a weirdo. Do you want to come and meet me?" And my nan, she thinks you sound like a nice man. And I did, and I started speaking to criminals, and that was it. And, I don't do a term criminal as a pejorative term, but that was how it came about. It was a tragic thing. It was a horrible thing. I didn't have anyone to turn to. I don't for 1 second. Somebody said to me, "Oh, you want sympathy?" Well, yeah, at the time I did, because we're in a long-distance relationship, and the woman you love nearly gets killed. Of course you want sympathy. You want a little bit of understanding. And sometimes you don't get that, but something very good has come from it. So I meet these people now, and they're at various points of their life, and I'm very upfront about who I am and what I want. And yeah, they tell me some of the most amazing things. And the ones with Dave Courtney are very, very funny. The one, Frank Portinari, I mean, if you look at him on paper, wow, he should be a very scary man. But I really like Frank. I really like the guy. I got on very well with him, and I would make a lot of time for him. So that was how, without being too rambling, that's how it happened.
Yeah. What I really like about it is the story in itself obviously is quite upsetting, but it, as you say, has yielded something positive, and it's much like the stories of the people that you interview. They've gone through something, or they've had really difficult lives, or they've made the wrong decision, or whatever. But a lot of your podcast interviews focus on the positive aspect of that they've come through, and they are now an advocacy for change or peace or whatever. Like, for example, that Change Your Life, Put Down the Knife campaign thing, which obviously is massively positive. But what I like about it as well is that the stories, in their own kind of way, again, as you mentioned, they can be really funny, and I think finding that balance between these real harsh kind of stories and then getting some comedy out of it and I think it just occurs naturally, and I really like that about the podcast, which is kind of why I wanted to talk about it, because I think it's definitely people should definitely listen to it.
Thank you.
I won't.
No. And I'm not going to bore you, but I think you'll like this, though. I know Tony will appreciate this, well, you all will. It took a while to get my sort of breakthrough with a certain individual, and it took about 5 years of going up to his house and seeing him. And it was cool. We knew each other, but it was always like, we were always good, but I never really bonded until he had a friend who was a retired criminal. I swear, hand on heart, this is the truth, right? His nickname was Shotgun, as in double-barreled shotgun, because he had a double-barreled name, right? I went up there, and I saw... His name
wasn't Adam Brewfield Strawn, was it?
No.
Sorry.
No. I've met him. I like him. He's cool. But no, so I go up there, and I say to this guy, "How you doing?" "Yeah, we're all right, Matty." He says, "But we've had a bad day. Shotgun's in hospital, amputated one of his legs because he's got diabetes. And now, and this is a fact, thanks to me, he's on the criminal underworld as sawn off." Right. And that was the moment that we actually had a breakthrough. And they were like, "We fucking love you. Come here, son." And that was it. And we went from there. So yeah, it's been quite a journey.
Yeah, I can imagine. Cool. Okay, that's most of what I have planned. So I guess we'll get Alex to jump back in. Has there been any other interactions, any other comments?
I think the majority of the audience are engrossed in the stories to type. To be honest, there is people out there watching, but the comments have been thinner on the ground, sadly. Although Ian Bowden has mentioned the weirdest place that he gigged in was a cricket club. Only comedian sandwiched between 4 games of bingo and a guest the 1940s radio show theme tune.
Who books that? I mean, no, I don't know. Sorry. Had to be that dick. No.
That's actually a really good. It's a good jumping off point. Actually, we've kind of done the weirdest venue you've ever gigged in. What about potentially, if you can remember, if there's one that sticks out? What about the worst gig setup that you've ever experienced? I mean, in between 4 games of bingo, probably tops that for me. To be honest, that sounds pretty horrendous. But is there anything that you can specifically remember that was just a terrible setup that should never have really been a gig, or you knew was never going to work?
Well, I IMC'd a gig one time at a Royal British Legion club, and just before the comedy started, the president of the venue, he went on stage and he said, "Right, we're going to have some comedy in a minute, but first of all, I think we all just need to remember dear old Reg, who was a member here for 50 years, and he was an old soldier who passed away." So we'll just have a minute. We can just all have a minute's silence for Reg. We had a minute's silence, and then it was, "And now over to the comedian." And I go on to try and MC a gig from a minute's silence.
Do you think he mixed up the idiom, I suppose? Dying on stage is something.
Yeah,
is something he's got horribly wrong there. I think that's terrible. Is there any gigs that you guys can remember that you've done where you've walked in and you've gone, "This is a terrible setup. This is never going to work," and then for some reason it does? Let's try and maybe pick something a little bit more positive. What about that? We'll go with Nghia first.
Yeah, sorry.
That's all right.
I guess it was based. I guess because it was like earlier in my career, when the first few years doing stand up, of course I was still doing those. Like used to have to go through those open mics, the variety open mics. So I used to back in Edinburgh. I used to do like those literary open mics where people would do poems, and of course you have to follow. Obviously you have to follow people doing poems about racial injustices or their dead Korean grandmothers. But obviously because obviously you still have you sign up to do comedy and you still have to fulfill your service.
I really don't want to slam variety shows, but they were always so hard. Again, I mean, I've had to do a set once on stage there was in fact a couple of comedians that I know have had this experience where you've been doing your thing on stage and there's a drop curtain behind you, and then I'm about 5-10 minutes into a 20-minute set, and a band is sound checking their drum kit behind me, which is I mean, come on. But no, I was supposed to say something positive, wasn't it? Tony, what about yourself?
Well, other weird gigs.
Well, just maybe something we've walked in, you gone, "This is not going to go well," and then you were surprised.
Well, I always find that I'm quite a bad judge of gigs. When I walk into a gig and I look at it and I think, "Oh God, this is going to be terrible," usually they're the most fun. And where I walk in and I think, "This looks lovely, piece of cake, this one," and that's when I normally die on my ass. So yeah, I quite like it when you see a gig and it looks a bit. I think Matt is very similar. I think me and Matt have probably done some gigs together where we've looked at the room and thought, "Oh, this could be tough," but then we've had good old time of it because it becomes a bit of a challenge. But yeah, there's certainly been rooms where I've just walked in and if I didn't need the money, I would have turned around and walked straight back out again. You know, like Grandpa Simpson, isn't it? The meme where he just walked straight in and straight back out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose it is until you sort of just get up and do the gig, you can't really tell, I suppose.
I don't know about any other guys as well. I think it's a bit, because comedians, we all have a bit of an ego, don't we? And I think sometimes, even when I've been at gigs where I've seen other comics who are really good comics but die because the gig's not set up right, there's something in my head telling me, no, they weren't able to do this, but you'll definitely be able to do this. You're good enough to do this. And then, of course, you go on and die.
This gig was made for you.
Yeah. No, I'm sure I can do this. I've seen 3 other really good comics all die in this. I'm sure I can do well.
I guess also like I did a show like, so before I moved to Ireland, like I did the 2 shows in this other part of central Vietnam. One was in like the former imperial capital, but we were doing it in a like American style 50s diner. Because obviously you know who won the war, right? But yeah, so it was like, so I had to do like 40 minutes, and apparently we were doing the rooms upstairs, and apparently the owner was being a bit of a dick. He wouldn't turn down the music downstairs, so we had to play. So the 2 of us, we had to do like each of us had to do 40 minutes while the music was playing downstairs. But so you know, and so it was literally us facing against the music. But obviously, because the audience was supporting him now, they were trying to listen hard. So none of us like really died. So we did quite well in the end, but it was just quite annoying. You know, this the music, and people, and you still have to deliver your set, and you have to stand there for like 35 to 40 minutes.
I think the setup for the gig can be however it is ultimately, as long as you're not trying to combat other, like if there's bingo going on. I'll tell you the worst one. As much as you want to be supportive of causes and things like that, charity gigs all the time will have some form of raffle, right? And I will always agree to do it, right? I will always do it because I don't want to look like a prick, right? And I'll agree to do it, but you always have to. You either end up doing like a split set where you have to do say 10 minutes and then leave, and they do a raffle and come back, or you have to host the raffle or a quiz. I've had a quiz before at a charity gig, right? And then do another set after that, and it never goes well. But I feel like I'm always stuck in that kind of, oh well, I have to, they've asked me if I can do it. I don't want to say no, so I'll go and do it. And those the charity ones for me are always they're the only ones where I feel like I know that it's not going to go well straight away. But other than that, I think as long as the venue, I mean, I've done a gig where, some of you might have done this one as well. It's a mirth control one, where the room's kind of an L shape, and half of the audience is watching you on a TV screen round the corner. Yeah, it's a little pub in, what is it, Maidstone? Is it Maidstone?
Yeah, the Walnut Tree. But Brendan Burns did that gig over the phone once. He forgot he was on, and I asked him about it. I don't know him that well, but I asked him, and he went, "Oh fuck, they still talk about that?" I was going, "Yep." And the guy phoned up and said, "Brendan, you're meant to be here. What are you doing?" "Oh, put me on loudspeaker." So they just put him on loudspeaker, and he had to go back and say to him, "How am I doing? You can't fucking tell me how I'm doing," because he couldn't actually hear the feedback, and he was going, "You're storming it, mate. You've got an applause break." And they had to send him the money. So yeah, just weird, man. But that's genuinely not an urban myth. I had to ask him about it. You get the urban myths on the circuit. But that is a true one.
He was ahead of the curve, really, wasn't he? With
absolutely.
What we're doing, isn't it, now?
He was doing that pre-COVID. Absolutely. So
I don't mind downing it now. I've only got a little bit of brain.
Down it.
Only got a bit. I once got out of a gig that I didn't want to do because a guy, he was one of those sort of really edgelord comics, and there's nothing wrong with that. I got nothing against people who are edgy. You know, stick it to the man by all means. But he did the thing that Bill Hicks does. You know, or used to do, where you put the microphone in your mouth like that, and he was a West Country guy, and he was a poet. Because you mentioned poetry earlier on, and he would do performance poetry, and his catchphrase was "You don't want to hear the truth," and he was a West Country guy. Nobody wanted to hear the truth. He was bang on in that respect, right? And he would say stuff like just a series of words. He was called Terry Fury. He was proper angry, and he would say stuff like he would go stuff like "You don't want to hear the truth. Wedded bliss, hit and miss. Homeless man takes a piss. You get splashback in your eye. Now you're blind, but you don't know why. Thank you." And every time he said, and so he did it one day, and he "True love does not exist. Thank you." You know, ridiculous. So he did about 6 poems, got 6 rounds of applause, took the microphone, put it in his mouth, and he was going, "Jamie Oliver, that sucker of Satan's cock." Now, I like Jamie Oliver. Right? Like, if you're going to stick it to somebody, why Jamie fucking Oliver? And he gets the microphone and it gets stuck in his mouth. He's going, and he starts crying. It sounds like he's doing the didgeridoo, right? And he goes like that. And they managed to sort of unscrew the cable, and he had the microphone stuck in his mouth. And I, who was due to go on after him, just said, "Look, why don't I walk with him to hospital and we'll get the microphone removed?" And we ended up going to hospital. Obviously, he's got a microphone sticking out of his gob for like a 2-mile walk. And we're trying, "Please don't anybody speak to us." And we get there, and the woman behind the counter had the audacity to say, people who work in NHS, God bless you, I would never criticize you. She looks at me, looks at him and goes, "Name?" And I said, "Well, it's not me, it's my friend." "Yeah, what's your friend's name?" And I said, "Well, I only know him as Terry Fury, edgelord of poetry." And she goes, "What seems to be the problem?" And I'm like, "Oh, you're fucking joking me, aren't you?" And to this day, I regret not saying "You don't want to hear the truth." I should have done, but I didn't. And they managed to get the microphone out, and he was absolutely fine. And as far as I know, he carried on doing poetry, but I didn't have to do that gig, and I'm so pleased. I'm just pleased.
Yeah,
he's now the poet laureate. Do you know that?
It reminds me of a guy from the first ever set of gigs I used to do in Bournemouth at a pub called the Winchester, which isn't there anymore, which is sad. But Alex, if you want to jump in, you might remember who I'm referring to. Do you remember Hi Hal the Poet?
Oh Christ! Yeah.
So he would do similar stuff. He would just do very short form, like "Life is meaningless," but then or something like that, you know. And he would say all these kind of short form stuff, wouldn't he? And then go headbutt the microphone every time. Every time he would do like a haiku or something, like really really short syllables. Over really quickly, and then headbutt the microphone every time. How that man hasn't got serious brain problems from multiple concussions, I don't know. But there you go.
But by his style, he had that before he came in, so it wasn't really all there.
There's a great time for Matt to come back in, just sort of a real close-up shot of him, just sort of with a beard, just looking a bit.
just a couple more comments. Ian was back on with regards to the gig that he did that involved a lot of bingo. He said, thinking about it, it was the most I've been paid for a gig that didn't involve me driving other acts. So probably means that he did a couple of rounds of bingo and won. So also, we've got Mark Herman. Mark Herman says, nice to see some familiar faces. Hope all you guys are well. And also, Mark Dean Quinn came back on. He was also done a corporate that apparently lasted 2 hours.
Amazing! I fucking love you.
The George Cross is in the post. Mark.
Good man. Yeah. Amazing.
It's that doesn't surprise me at all. He was probably only booked to do 20 minutes, but because he's probably annoyed by the setup so much that he might have even gone around the room and switched all the plug sockets off, something like that.
That's amazing.
Cool. So I'm probably gonna wrap it up there. Thank you so much for joining me and having a chat. This has been really good fun. Again, anyone that's watching, thank you very much. If you'd like to donate to the PayPal link as well, please support the show. So we can. Oh, thank you, Tony, for pointing to the QR code as well. I appreciate that. I appreciate the effort, man. Oh, there we go. It's in the middle of the screen. So if we were just sort of in the there you go. Perfect. If you'd like to donate, I'd very much appreciate that. Any donations will be split equally between the acts that have been on this evening after my drinks have been paid for, of course. So thank you again to my panel. Thank you to Matt, Nghia, and Tony. And I'll leave you with this. Stay safe, drink sensibly. Please don't spill it. Thank you very much to Alex. Have you got anything to say?
Yes, I've borrowed the rim shot sound effect from my show, so it is branded slightly differently, but it got here in the end.
There we go.
There we go.
By the way, I couldn't remember. I still can't find out what the ticking boxes joke was. I'm going to have to.
Okay.
Something about working in bomb disposal, wasn't it? I was only.
That's unprecedented of you, Tony. That really.
Take a swig.
There we go.
But people will have to try and find it on my Twitter feed. Puns
yes,
on
absolutely. Hashtag puns on the run. Still check that out. Conversations with Criminals. Make sure you do. And hang on, I'll get there. Hot Pod.
The Hot Podcast.
Hot Podcast. Yeah. Perfect. There we go. Thank you again so much, guys. Stay safe. Drink sensibly. And we'll see you again next Wednesday at 10. All the best. Good night. Bye-bye.